connection with AI and with all the stuff that's been carried on, with empathy, with community, with all these stuff. And at the same time, I feel to be very privileged to be here for a lot of reasons. One reason is being with all of you, and the other is being an architect at home. I couldn't have asked for a better place to prove for you that architecture actually works. But why does it work? The short answer is because it just works. It's impact us and it creates our experience. But the longer answer is we are driven by experience as well. So why are we driven by experience? I'm an architect, and I always ask myself the question, why? And I think the more curious you are, the deeper you get. And then the deeper you get, the less you understand, but the more you do. So why does it work, right? Architecture started by us architects doing building. So we were dealing with matter straight away. Architecture evolved where architects started to do drawings of buildings, so we started using paper. From there, we started using screens, and we started to do architecture for screens. Computer came in, we started to do architecture for code, for programs, and for computer. After that, architecture evolved for virtual reality goggles and so on, so we started to develop spaces and experiences for virtual reality platforms. I am someone who's interested in that fundamental aspect of architecture of experience building. But we all know, and we have a lot of scientists in this room, that experience actually happens in our brains. And that led me to the conclusion that, okay, probably the future platform for architecture is going to be the brain itself. But then how do we do that? What we realized is we're always building architecture and spaces and experiences to actually impact the user. And as Churchill said once, we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. So that loop between the experience shaping us and us shaping our buildings is a very important cultural expression that we all live by. We design our cities, our buildings, our pens, our tables, our books, and they all have a cultural expression in them. However we express that, the loop comes back to us. We know how we behave in a church differently than we behave in a McDonald's restaurant, differently than we behave in our house. That is mainly because architecture socially frames us and as well provokes a very strong experience. So that was a kind of a summary of a simplistic history of architecture. But I'd like to jump to the second phase, which is to make a simplistic history of the metaverse, probably to explain it and how I understand it and say why it's relevant. So the metaverse started in the 1990s when we actually built the internet. The first 10 years, from 1990 to the year 2000, we were actually building the internet itself. But what is the internet? The internet is two things. It's the internet and the World Wide Web. The internet is 15 to 20 cables running across the ocean with all the computers connected to them. But then the World Wide Web is all the experience that emerges from that. Obviously, internet has shaped everything after it happened. From the year 2000 to 2010, we were actually building the platform. So from building the internet itself to building the platforms, we had Google and all the big guys. From 2010 to 2020, we actually built all the apps. These were all the apps that we use, and very famous Apple had the campaign, there's an app for that. There's always an app for something. I suspect that the year 2020 to 2030 are going to be the years of content creation. If we overlap this with a second layer of the internet, which is what have these been doing? In the first 10 years building the internet was the internet of databases and data and connectivity and files and not more than that. The next 10 years when platforms emerged, it was the internet of things where all computers were connected. We had Google Maps, we had to move around and things were actually connected to each other, creating the internet of things. With platforms emerging such as Instagram and Twitter and all these things, we actually connected people. When people were connected, now we stand in a very important moment in history where internet has connected databases, things, and people. So what's next? In an era where content creation is going to be more important than ever, and that's why we see skyrocketing in TikTok and Instagram and all these things, everybody now can be a creator, but then how we solve that, we need ownership. And that's where tokenization, blockchain comes in. But then where's the metaverse part? Obviously in spatialization. What's going to happen in the internet, going back to this kind of very simplistic 4-decade history, the first 10 years were more text-based. The second 10 years were more 2D and graphic. The third 10 years were more interactive. And the next 10 years are going to be more immersive. So what does that mean? That means that the internet is going to go from a 2-dimensional screen thing to a 3-dimensional screen. But once that's happening, we have a layer that actually proves ownership and stakeholder within that. And that's how we can create the magic word community, right? We're in a place where community is probably the keyword to everything that happens here. And at the same time, we know that there's only two ways to interact with technology. The first is that we decide what technology does. And the second is we keep technology to decide what we do. But I don't believe in that. As they said, we need to dream for a better future. But designers say usually, dreams are not enough, we need some plans. And we need action. And the people who are gonna design the future today are the people who are in this room. Because we're talking about the topics that are really pressing what we need to do. So who hits first hits twice, obviously. The metaverse is fundamentally an experience-based industry and shift and all what that comes around. And then the metaverse is not tomorrow. It is today because as I made this kind of history, these past 40 years have created the internet. Now we actually act upon what we want to do next with it. So why don't we be the first to get in this and actually shape it? Because as we know, if usually you don't do it, somebody else is going to come and do it for you, and then you're going to have to buy it from them, not because you want to, but because you need to. As designers, we don't want to be in that place. Where we want to be is in the place where we decide where actually things are going by actually designing the future today. In a place like this, I cannot just ignore the specificity of this place. And I would like to kind of go on things in a very kind of hard way, like very tangible way, right? So what we can do, what can be done there? We can do things in a lot of ways, but I'm going to stress on three very important topics, which is economic, spiritual, and the last, which is I think the most important, and here's the mission here, the ethical part. So regarding spirituality, we talked about experience and we know how architecture shapes that. And I think given that it's fundamentally more important to be engaged in creating spaces that actually provoke these spiritual experiences in the virtual, in the metaverse, to avoid young people doing a lot of weird escapism that we don't need. So if we don't put that grounds for them, they're going to go somewhere, so we better be that place. The second thing is, this is a place where the message is probably the most fundamental part of it. And then how do we send out the message? The metaverse is actually amplifying that. There's a whole generation called the Gen Z, who's been kind of studied by big companies like Nokia and Deloitte and all the big players to understand how to actually go there. It's a virgin market that all the brands want to be in. Why? Because there's a new potential there. There's a new potential that actually speaks a different language, which is the language of the internet, the platforms, and the metaverse. And the Vatican has a very unique opportunity to actually go there and target these people in the best way possible, because if the message doesn't go there, there's another message that's going to go there anyway. So amplifying the message, outreach, and engaging people and building community in the virtual as well as the physical is something that the metaverse facilitates. But then what's in it for economy? In terms of economics, the blockchain ownership and stakeholdership within the metaverse is very strong, as people can now actually become stakeholders in the mission of the church. Ownership is important because whenever you own a piece of something, you want to follow what's happening and you want to engage positively and try to do the best for it, so then it returns good on you. From that perspective, I really see these two very, very strong things. But then what we can do more? We can sell artwork. We can have people owning things. We can actually honor early backers that come in and actually believe in the message, put in their effort, their sweat, their brains, and then create things for the future. I'm going to just finish this with one important quote from Mark 16:15, as he said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation." If we need to do this today, there's no running away from using the metaverse and the internet, all the platforms, all what's there to shape a better future. The content we want to have be created in the next 10 years is one that I think we all agree what it is. It's something that fosters diversity, fosters inclusion, promotes a lot of the positive aspects of the message that this place have, and preach to all the young people who will be the generation for the future. I'd like to leave it here as a call for action for all of us to get together because, as you said, the metaverse is the spatial internet and all what's going to take to make it happen. That's all of us. That's all our expertise, our brains, our visions, and our hands and sweat. Thank you very much.